Disclaimer: it's inspired by reality, shaped by imagination.
What happened on The View this morning stunned the studio and sent shockwaves across the internet. Jane Fonda, Hollywood icon, lifelong activist, and never one to back down, sat across from Joy Behar, prepared for a spirited discussion on rising grocery costs. But no one expected the conversation to explode into one of the most intense confrontations the show has aired in years. The topic seemed simple at first. Are grocery companies price gouging American families? But the moment Joy pushed back on Jane's claims about corporate greed, the tone shifted. Jane leaned in with that unmistakable fire in her eyes, the same intensity that made her both beloved and controversial for decades. Joy, known for never letting a debate slip past her, matched her energy beat for beat. It turned fast. Interrupted answers, raised eyebrows, a frustrated sigh from Jane that echoed through the studio. Audience gasps every time the tension spiked. Even the co-hosts exchanged nervous glances as the two women dug deeper into the fight. Then came the moment no one could have predicted. Jane Fonda, refusing to let her message be overshadowed, called out the grocery industry in a way that left Joy stunned and the audience silent. By the time the segment ended, viewers weren't arguing about the price of milk. They were arguing about who won the showdown.
The segment started with warmth, the kind that usually settles the room before things get serious. Joy Behar greeted Jane Fonda with a smile that felt genuine enough, and the audience applauded loudly as Jane walked out in a crisp white blazer, her silver hair catching the studio lights just right. She waved, blew a playful kiss, and slid into her seat with the grace that only decades of cameras can teach. "Jane Fonda, everybody," Joy said, tapping her cards on the table. "You're looking fantastic. What's the secret?" Jane laughed softly. "Good lighting and vegetables. Mostly vegetables." The panel chuckled. Even Sunny leaned in, teasing, "So that means we're all doomed." The room eased into a friendly rhythm. Jane talked about a charity event she just hosted in Atlanta, something focused on youth programs and food insecurity. She described hugging grandmothers, handing out bags of produce, and dancing with kids who looked at her like she was visiting from a different planet. Joy raised a brow. "You danced? On purpose?" "Absolutely," she said. "You should have seen me. I nearly pulled something I didn't know I still had." The table erupted in laughter. Even the audience joined in with warm applause. Kelly, filling in as guest moderator for the day, added, "You're always doing something meaningful. I swear you rest less than any of us." Jane shrugged, a little bashful. "Keeps me honest and moving." They switched to lighter chatter. Joy complimented Jane's outfit. Jane returned the favor by praising Joy's fire-red power look. They joked about aging, joints that crack on command, and the absurdity of celebrity wellness routines. For a moment, the whole set felt like a brunch table instead of a national talk show. Then came a brief nostalgic moment. Jane talked about her early days traveling around the country, the diners she loved, the conversations she had with regular families between film shoots. "You always say real people keep you grounded," Joy noted. "They do. People who work hard, who don't get the attention or credit, but keep this whole country running. They remind me what actually matters." The audience let out a soft awe, the kind that bubbles up when a moment feels sincere. Joy leaned her chin into her hand, almost sweetly. "You always did have a soft spot for the little guy." Jane smiled. "Someone has to." Kelly shifted the conversation to Jane's new documentary about food access in urban communities. Clips played briefly on the studio screens. Families cooking together, volunteers carrying boxes of groceries, Jane speaking to local organizers with her sleeves rolled up. "It's one of the things I'm proudest of. Food tells the truth about how a society treats its people." Joy nodded, thoughtful. "That's a powerful way to put it." Jane gave a small, grateful smile. "Thanks, Joy." Everything felt calm, warm, respectful. Even viewers at home could feel it. The comfortable back and forth between two women who had known each other for years, even if they didn't always agree. But beneath the jokes and smiles, A shift was already humming below the surface. Jane mentioned one line, soft, almost offhand, about how large grocery chains have more control over families' budgets than Congress does. Joy's eyes flickered. The smallest spark of disagreement. A tiny seed planted. Soon it would grow into something neither of them expected.
The shift began so quietly that most of the audience didn't notice it at first. Joy slid her note card to the top of the stack, cleared her throat, and leaned in with that familiar posture that always signaled the real show was about to begin. The frenzied banter faded, replaced by the unmistakable edge of a host ready to challenge her guest. "So, Jane," Joy said, tapping her pen once, "you mentioned something before the break. You said grocery companies have more control over families' budgets than Congress. That's a pretty strong accusation." Jane didn't flinch. "I don't think it's an accusation. It's an observation." Sonny shifted in her seat, sensing the tension rising. The audience sat up a little straighter. Joy kept her tone light, but her smile tightened along the edges. "But wouldn't you say prices are going up for a lot of reasons? Supply chain issues, fuel costs, inflation. Isn't that a little more complicated than pointing at grocery companies and yelling villain?" Jane folded her hands, calm but resolute. "Of course it's complicated, but families aren't imagining these price hikes, Joy. When a grocery chain reports record profits during a period when average Americans are struggling to afford basics, something's wrong." There were murmurs from the audience, agreement from some, curiosity from others. Joy lifted one eyebrow. Or maybe they're just running a business. Jane's eyes narrowed slightly. "Joy, businesses don't need to triple their margins while everyday people ration eggs and vegetables." Kelly tried to ease the tension. "Okay, so let's break this down." But Joy cut in before she could finish. "I'm just saying we shouldn't accuse companies of price gouging without proof." Jane leaned forward, her tone sharpening. "The proof is in the receipts, Joy. People are paying more, and it's not just inflation, it's strategic price manipulation." Some audience members clapped. Others exchanged uncertain looks. The air thickened. Joy crossed her arms. "Jane, you're an activist. We get that. But grocery chains aren't cartoon villains twirling mustaches and plotting to rob families." Jane let out a breath, long and heavy. "I'm not calling them villains. I'm saying they're taking advantage of a moment. That's not ideology. That's reality." Sonny stepped in gently. "There have been investigations, Joy. Some companies admitted to increasing prices beyond cost changes." Joy shrugged. "Investigations don't equal guilt." Jane's expression tightened, the muscles around her jaw flexing. "Joy, when a company blames rising milk prices on inflation, but their profit reports show they made billions more than the year before, that's not a coincidence. That's exploitation." Some audience members gasped at the word. Joy pointed her pen toward Jane, a move that always signaled irritation. "Well, maybe you should run a grocery chain before you decide how they should manage their books." The panel recoiled slightly at the comment. Even Whoopi, watching from her moderator's seat, closed her eyes for a second as if bracing herself. Jane's eyes flashed, not anger exactly, but disbelief. "Are you saying people shouldn't criticize corporations unless they're CEOs themselves?" Joy lifted her hands. "I'm saying you're oversimplifying a complex system." Jane didn't blink. "And I'm saying you're defending one." The crowd erupted, some cheering, some booing, some gasping as if they'd watched someone flip a table. Kelly stepped in again, trying to steady the conversation. Okay, let's take a breath. We're talking about families struggling with grocery bills." But the moment had already tipped. Joy leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Jane, you always think everything comes down to corporate greed, but sometimes prices go up because the world is complicated, not because everyone's out to get us." Jane's voice dropped to a low, firm register. "Joy, you don't need to believe everyone's out to get us. Just believe the people who are struggling." The audience went silent. Joy didn't like silence. She filled it fast. Americans know when they're being gouged. They don't need celebrities telling them how to feel. Jane fired back without hesitation. They don't need celebrities defending corporations either. That line hit hard enough that even the crew members behind the cameras reacted. You could hear breaths catch. Someone whispered, "Oh, wow," off stage. Joy sat back, eyes narrowed, clearly stung. Jane didn't gloat. She didn't smirk. She just looked at Joy with a steady, unwavering seriousness. The politeness from earlier was gone. The gloves weren't just off. They'd been thrown into the audience. The real fight had begun. The tension finally breaks when Jane folds her hands on the table and looks straight at Joy. Her voice softens, but the room tightens anyway. Everyone knows that calm tone is the one people use right before they say something they've been holding in for too long. "Joy," she says, "you keep talking about parents being overwhelmed, about society falling apart, about attention spans collapsing. I agree with all of that, but you're twisting what I said. I'm not blaming people for using social media. I'm blaming the companies that built a system designed to trap them in it." Joy raises her brows. "No, Jane, you're blaming the public. You're blaming regular folks for being addicted, like they're weak-minded children." Jane doesn't flinch. "I'm blaming the people who profit from keeping us disconnected from each other. That isn't the public. That's the industry you keep giving a pass to." The room stills. Even Whoopi stops scribbling on her note cards. Joy's voice hardens. "You're romanticizing the past. You're assuming people were happier, healthier, more whole before smartphones. You're arguing from nostalgia, not reality." "That's not nostalgia," Jane replies. "That's lived experience. I've watched generations move from talking over dinner to staring into screens. I've watched friendships shrink into emojis. I've watched families sit together without actually being together. Don't tell me this is progress." Sunny tries to ease the tension. "Jane, you're talking about connection. Joy's talking about autonomy. What do you do with the fact that social media helps people find community, especially kids who feel isolated?" Jane nods, acknowledging the point. "It does help some people. I'm not denying that. But we can't pretend the benefits erase the damage. Just because a thing can be useful doesn't mean it isn't harmful." Joy fires back. "But you're painting the whole thing as toxic. That's the issue." "No," Jane says firmly. "I'm saying we've handed our emotional well-being to companies that don't care about it, and that is toxic." There's a beat of silence. Then Joy leans forward, elbows planted on the table, the classic Behar move when she's gearing up for a swing. "So what's your solution? Let's say the whole world listens to you. What do you want people to do? Throw their phones out the window? Raise kids in the woods? Because that's what you sound like." Jane's laugh is soft, but carries an edge. "I'm asking people to reclaim their humanity, not abandon technology. I'm asking them to remember they existed before notifications. I'm asking them to talk to each other with their voices, not their thumbs." Joy smirks. "You think people don't know that? You think they're unaware? Jane, the world is complicated. You're simplifying it for drama." Jane's eyes narrow, but she keeps her composure. "No, I'm simplifying it so people stop pretending this is normal. Because it isn't. It shouldn't be normal for a mother to talk to her child and compete with an algorithm for their attention. It shouldn't be normal for adults to forget how to sit quietly with their own thoughts." Whoopi leans back, watching them like she's trying to decide when to step in. Joy doesn't back down. "You're judging them. That's what it feels like." "And you," she says quietly, "are defending the system that created the problem." That line lands hard. It's not loud, it's not flashy, but it's sharp enough that the studio atmosphere shifts. Even the audience seems to breathe differently. Joy's jaw tightens. That's a cheap shot. It's the truth, Jane says. The table goes silent. Not the comfortable kind, the kind that means someone is about to snap. And that's when everyone realizes they've hit the emotional peak of the argument, where logic stops mattering and personal stakes take over.
The moment the show comes back from commercial, the energy is tense enough to feel like static. Joy sits straighter than usual, chin lifted, eyes sharper. Jane, meanwhile, looks collected but unyielding, like someone who's made peace with saying what needs to be said. Whoopi tries to reset the tone. All right, let's bring this back. The question today is whether grocery companies are price-gouging families. This is something people are dealing with every single day. But Joy jumps in before she can finish. And what we need, she says, is a discussion that doesn't guilt people for choices they have no control over. Jane turns her head slowly. Joy, this isn't about guilt. It's about accountability. Grocery giants aren't struggling. They're bragging about record profits. That's not survival. That's exploitation. Joy lets out a light laugh that isn't really a laugh. Here we go. Corporations are evil, people are powerless, and we're all supposed to believe that, what, if CEOs were nicer, milk would be cheaper? Jane's voice stays level. No, but if CEOs weren't padding shareholder pockets while shrinking packages and raising prices, families wouldn't be gasping for air every time they check out. The table stiffens. Sunny glances between them like she's tracking a tennis match. Joy folds her hands. You're ignoring the nuance. There are supply chain pressures, there are transportation issues, there are global factors. You can't just scream greed and pretend that fixes anything. I'm not pretending it fixes anything. I'm saying it explains why families are being squeezed while executives get bonuses the size of small towns. Joy opens her mouth, but Jane keeps going, sharper now. And don't tell people they're imagining it. They're not. They know what their lives cost. They know when chicken used to be $8 and now it's $14. They know that companies are blaming inflation while quietly announcing double-digit profit jumps. Joy fires back. You're assuming the worst possible motives. You're turning business decisions into moral failings. That's not fair. It's not about fairness. It's about reality. And the reality is, grocery corporations are taking advantage of a crisis. They're telling families, sorry, costs are up, and then celebrating with investor calls saying, great news, everyone, we squeezed more out of the public. Joy's voice rises. Then what's your answer? Regulate everything? Nationalize food? Put the government in charge of aisle 7 and the dairy section? Jane doesn't blink. My answer is transparency. My answer is oversight. My answer is to stop pretending these companies are innocent victims of global economics. They're active participants in driving prices higher than they need to be. Joy leans in. You have no proof they're doing it intentionally. Jane leans right back. They publish the proof themselves every quarter. The audience reacts with a low rumble. Joy hears it and her frustration spikes. Jane, you're acting like grocery executives are cartoon villains rubbing their hands together in a dark room. They're running businesses. They're making decisions based on market conditions. And American families are paying for those decisions. Literally. Joy tries one more angle. You're focusing on the wrong thing. Instead of empowering people to shop smarter or budget better, you want them angry at companies. Jane's tone finally cracks. Not loud, not dramatic, but raw. They're already angry, Joy. They're angry because they're doing everything right and still can't afford basic food. You think this is about budgeting? People aren't failing. The system is failing them. That line hits Joy the wrong way. She leans back, eyes narrowing, lips thinning into a tight line. That's a cheap emotional play, and you know it. It's not emotional. It's the truth. Joy inhales sharply, and for a moment everyone thinks she's going to launch into another rebuttal. Instead, she goes silent, a cold, brittle silence, the kind that says she's inching toward her limit. The limit arrives when Jane adds, families deserve better than corporate excuses. Joy's chair shifts, her mic crackles.
and the tension between them finally snaps. This is the moment the studio realizes they've crossed from debate into something personal, something neither of them can dial back, and no one knows what Joy is going to do next.
The moment the tension breaks, the whole table feels it. The cameras are still rolling, the audience is holding its breath, and Joy sits frozen for a few seconds before lifting her chin and looking straight ahead. She doesn't say anything. She doesn't have to. The silence itself feels like a statement. Jane softens just a little, not in her stance but in her expression. "Look," she says, her voice steady again, "this isn't about winning an argument on TV. It's about what people are dealing with. No one should feel ashamed for struggling, and no one should feel dismissed when they speak up about being squeezed." Whoopi jumps in gently, trying to pull the moment back from the edge. "We all know families are hurting. That's real. And we can talk about solutions, but we can't ignore what's happening out there." The audience responds with quiet, thoughtful applause. They're not cheering the drama. They're reacting to the honesty. The room feels a little heavier, but in a meaningful way. Joy finally speaks, her tone lower than before. "People deserve answers," she says. "I can agree with that." It's not an apology, it's not a retreat, but it's the closest she'll come to acknowledging how deep the issue runs. Jane nods respectfully, accepting the moment for what it is. The show wraps soon after, and the credits roll over a room that still feels like it's buzzing, not from the clash, but from the weight of everything that was said. Viewers at home aren't talking about who won. They're talking about grocery bills, shrinking packages, and why families feel like they're being pushed to their limit. And that's the part that sticks. This wasn't just a fiery exchange or a viral moment. It was a conversation that forced people to look at something they deal with every day. It didn't give easy answers. It didn't solve the problem, but it made it impossible to ignore. If you're watching and you felt that moment hit close, you're not alone. And if you think more people need to hear this kind of conversation, share it, talk about it, and keep the pressure on. Because families everywhere deserve better than rising prices and empty explanations.